So here we are again, back by stubbornly unpopular demand. And tonight we're following Spotify down a rabbit hole. While I was working this weekend, Spotify kicked up a piece of music that stirred the bed of the river for me, and and got me to pay attention to some lyrics that I've been listening to since I was about 13 years old, but hadn't actually paid attention to until I dug into them on the weekend and thought that I'd like to share some thoughts with you tonight. So, this is an astonishing piece of music off what for me is certainly my favorite Genesis album. This is uh, Tony Banks writing Heathaze.
No cloud, a sleepy calm, sun-baked earth that's cooled by gentle breeze, and trees with rustling leaves, only endless days without a care. Nothing must be done, silent as a day can be, far off sounds of others on their chosen run, as they do. All those things they feel give life some meaning, even if they're done.
So, here's the interesting thing about this song for me. As I say, I was 13 years old when I first heard this album. I went away on a youth adventure week with my school into the Lake District, the kind of thing where you climb up things and swim across things and mess about in things. And this was the album of that trip. It had just recently been released and it was on constant rotation. I think with me and a group of the other guys on the trip, but for me it was a really it stirred something in me. It stirred, I guess, a sense of melancholy, which I was probably always sort of attracted to. The interesting thing is, apart from some of the key tracks, as much as it's always about the lyrics for me, this particular song, I've heard it for years, but I'd never really engaged with the lyrics. I'd never really dug into them. I'd never really understood them. I got the tone of the lyrics. I got that melancholy, that sense of longing, that sense of hopelessness. But I didn't really understand the lyric. So, in a way, this channel has led me to look at these lyrics with baby eyes and to try and understand them in a way that I never had before, even though I feel like I emotionally understood the lyric all along. So, what we've got here is we've got melancholy. We've got somebody who is in what sounds in a way like a perfect day, no cloud, sleepy calm, cooled by gentle breeze, setting up the leaves of the trees, which are going to become increasingly important. We've got somebody who is separate from the world, is hearing the distant sound of it, but is not really engaged with it. He's hearing them. What is it? Far off sounds of others on their chosen run, as they do all those things that they feel give life some meaning, even if they're dull. So there's some speculation online about what this song is about, and I think it couldn't be clearer. The album Duke has as its sort of core song an awful lot of examination of the nature of being a musician, the nature of being famous, the nature of acquiring fame and then ultimately losing fame. That is the theme of the album. The track Duchess sort of tracks that story perfectly. And I think to an extent, this is a song that explores the same dynamic. I think what we've got here is we've got potentially Tony Banks himself, but we've got the musician who in his daytime, on his day off, knowing that his day only really starts at 5 o'clock at sound check, and then goes into the night. We've got the musician who on his day off is sort of experiencing this calm disconnect from the world, hearing and sensing the world going around him, and considering how all these other people are living their lives, and those lives give them meaning, but to him those lives of meaning are dull because this musician leads a different life. And I think that is continued into the core of this song. What's astonishing to me, firstly, is how I realized that these lyrics, the way they get written down in albums and on internet pages like this, they don't have the right punctuation. The punctuation on this page doesn't in any way reflect the rhythm and the cadence of these lyrics. And when Phil sings them with the tone that he gets and with the rhythm that he gets, they suddenly take on an entirely deeper meaning. And that meaning is communicated even when you don't engage with the words. But when you do, I mean, let's be honest, that's the purpose of this channel. Moving on.
As they do, all those things they feel give life some meaning. Even if they're done, it's time to stop this dreaming. Must rejoin the real world, as revealed by orange lights and a smoky atmosphere. The trees at night are shaken by that same wind, but their eyes. The trees will lose their withered leaves, but I just can't seem to let them loose. And they come freshly, those hot winds of the south. Oh, I feel like an alien, a stranger in an alien place.
So that chorus is the reason that I'm here tonight doing this. That chorus has been bouncing around my head for 3 nights. It's informed my dreams. But first, it's time to stop this dreaming, must rejoin the real world. I'm going to say it's probably about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The real world for this man is going to be revealed by orange lights and a smoky atmosphere. And to me, having toured a little bit with Marillion, the orange lights and the smoky atmosphere is the gig. It's the real world for this man is that world that starts at 4 o'clock for the sound check and continues through a gig that ends at midnight before you get back on the bus. Take it all apart, put it all in boxes, put the little boxes in the big boxes, drive the big boxes to the next place. His real world is revealed by orange lights and a smoky atmosphere. And I think that is a musician writing about being on the road, being a musician. That's why I make this assertion that we're dealing with part of the Duke/Duchess story, the story of the life of the musician in his little isolated bubble. But to get into this chorus, the trees and I are shaken by the wind, but whereas. When I read that on the page, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Why is that whereas in this sentence? And then I realize I've never really listened to these words. I've never really understood what this chorus was. I didn't realize even that it was so directly linking to the trees and the wind and and all of those themes, but just physically the way it is written and the way it is sung, there's a disconnect almost between the way the words are written and the words are sung. Because if I were to read this and if I were to write this down and read it as a piece of written English, it would read, "The trees and I are shaken by the same wind, but, comma, whereas the trees will lose their withered leaves, I just can't seem to let them loose." Boom. I realized I had to talk about this song because that is an astonishing piece of writing. It is such a higher grade piece of writing as a lyric. "The trees and I are shaken by the same wind, but whereas the trees will lose their withered leaves." That missing comma there is the whole ball game, and it makes it such a wonderful piece of writing, such a highly literate piece of writing. And then when we start to look at the theme, what's he really talking about? Is he talking? He's talking about a sense of being trapped in a sense of melancholy, being trapped in a sense of the baggage of your life dragging you down, and being unable to shake yourself of it. And that again feels like it fits into the Duke thematic. It fits into the thematic of a musician feeling disconnected from the world, feeling like you can't shake yourself of the past. You can't refresh yourself and rejuvenate yourself because you've reached that point where you've gone from the struggle to get to the top, and you're almost at that apex point where everything else from here is downward spiral. I love this chorus. Now I've finally engaged with it. I mean, 40 years later, I can't get this chorus out of my head.
Oh, I feel like an alien, a stranger in an alien place. Now the light is fading fast, chances slip away, time will come to pass, and there'll be a night then addicted to a perfume poison, betrayed by its aftertaste. Oh, we shall lose the wonder and find nothing in return. Any other substitutes, but their powers are their own.
So here we are again. Now the light is fading fast, chances slip away. Then there came a time. What's the words in Duchess? I can't bring them back to mind because this song's in my head. But in Duchess, they sing about that arc where the band is battling to be heard, and then all they had to do was take to the stage, and people would cheer. And then they took to the stage and people didn't care anymore. I think we're talking about that here. The fading light, the chances slipping away, the gigs are getting smaller, the audience are not quite connecting in the same way, you're not quite connecting with the music in the same way, and there will come a moment in your career as a musician where inevitably there'll be no more gigs. But you'll still be addicted to the perfumed poison. And the aftertaste of that poison will betray you. And you'll lose the wonder, you'll lose the moment, you'll lose the opportunity to get out there in the lights. And whatever you try and substitute it with, the passion of the rise to fame, whatever you try and substitute it with, it'll be powerless to meet that same high. I honestly believe that Tony Banks here is channeling that story theme of this album, which is that those middle years of the musician where you're looking at a future and realizing that it is finite, and realizing that maybe your best years are behind you. In truth, for this band, that wasn't the case. But it was certainly part of the thematic of this album. And I feel that's what we're seeing here, is a man in his middle years contemplating a time when the people will stop listening, people will stop coming. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Addicted to a perfume poison, betrayed by its aftertaste. Again, I come back to that amazing realization that as a person who is so connected to the importance of lyrics, I have listened to this album, this song, for 40 years and never entirely engaged with the specificity of these words, even when I felt so totally connected to the tone and the melancholy of them. That's why I do this, because I want people to look at the words. I want to look at the words myself and find deeper meaning in them, find the perfumed poison.
Many are the substitutes, but their powers are narrow. Beware the fisherman who's casting out his line into a dried up riverbed. But don't try to tell him, 'cause he won't believe. Throw some bread to the ducks instead. It's easier that way. Feel like an alien, stranger in an alien place.
Beware the fisherman who's casting out his line into a dried up riverbed. Isn't that the band that's still plugging away, making the same album they made for the last 10 years again and again? That's failing to realize that the business has moved past them, music has moved past them, their audience have moved past them. Isn't that what we're looking at here? And that sense of futility, that idea that rather than even try and convince your bandmates, the people around you, to do things a different way, to learn, to change, to innovate, it would be better to just throw bread to the ducks. It'll be easier to not even try. That feeling of being an alien in a stranger in an alien place, that feeling of not just melancholy, but desperation and inability to reach people and to even reach yourself potentially. As soon as I finish this recording, I'm going to do another song that I was, as I say, Spotify rabbit hole. From this song, I have to go to another song that deals with, if you like, the answer to this melancholy, the answer to this sense of frustration, to this idea that you can't even try and reason with the fisherman casting his line into a dried up riverbed, especially if that fisherman is yourself. Musicians at a certain point often get to the point that they write about the process of living on the road, of being on the road, of connecting with audiences and not connecting. Hogarth does it all the time. Bob Seger has done it. Lots and lots of musicians have written about the life of a musician. How can you not? It is your life. You start your day when other people are going home from work. You live in this splendid isolation, hearing the distant sounds of people going about their lives, and then you get called to, what was it? You get called to the orange lights and smoky atmosphere. I did some reading up, and there's an awful lot of people throw an awful lot of theories out about this song. I think this song is very simply part of the Duke concept. It's a song about getting to a point in your life where you're sensing the futility of it and the end of it. And you're seeing the trees losing their withered leaves and realizing you can't let them loose. You can't put them down. This is arguably one of the best songs Genesis ever made. It's probably not the first top of anybody's list, but I defy you to point me to a better 5-minute passage of songwriting and music than Heathaze. An interesting challenge. Listen to the song again. Take the lyrics and insert the punctuation that should be there to reflect the way Phil sings it. And then listen to it again and insert the punctuation that should be there to make sense of the English as it is written, not as a piece of poetry, but as a thought process. And it's astonishing to see how different those things are. But most of all, take a listen to it again because it's an astonishing piece of work and it deserves to be heard. And in the next video, we'll see if we can come up with a way to let those leaves, those withered leaves loose. Thanks for watching. I hope you do again. I really do. Until then, keep the faith.